Since this lockdown began, I've been trying to address our struggles brought on by coronavirus. One of the biggest is a feeling of absolute powerlessness. Hence my title, I Feel So Powerless. Is that you this morning? This virus has upended our lives so dramatically, the world may never be the same again. It's not just that we've been locked inside for 8 long weeks, or that whole sectors of the economy have been shut down entirely, or even that people all over the world have been coming down with a virus that's occasionally deadly. But now it looks like the future is bleak in all sorts of additional ways as the global economy collapses. I remember sitting in a meeting about 10 weeks ago, 8 of us in a room, face-to-face meetings, remember those? And I was trying to convince people to get ready for this. And I was met by absolute incredulity. But it's just like the flu. Surely there's no need to make a fuss, someone said. Someone literally took his phone out of his pocket and began to Google what the President of the United States was saying to prove that we had nothing to worry about. And that sounds like the height of foolishness now, doesn't it? But just a few weeks ago, we believed that we were all but immune to things like this. There might have been plagues once, but that was before modern medicine. It couldn't happen now. We've got disinfectants and antivirals and hospitals and ventilator machines. Those sorts of pandemics just can't happen. And then when it started coming closer, it was, well, the Italians, they're just chaotic, aren't they? It won't happen here. And, well, you know what the Spanish are like. But the virus just kept coming until the best we could hope for was to flatten the curve. Well, now we've flattened the curve, but over 40,000 people are dead, probably many more. And the curve doesn't seem quite flattened out in care homes just yet, does it? Who knows how many more may yet die. But even so, our attention turns to the economy. And it's never taken such a battering since modern records began. Well, the rich will survive, of course. They might even get richer. But the rest of us are in for a bumpy ride, aren't we? And who knows what happens when we all start going back to work again. We could see a second wave, a third or a fourth. This thing could keep bouncing around for years. And so the government says, get back to work, send the kids off to school. But the teachers' union says, well, don't make us go back while it's not safe. But, it's all about the economy, isn't it? We need to make sacrifices. But do you want your kids to be the ones who are sacrificed? Or your parents? Do you want to be the ones who are sacrificed? And so we're caught in the middle of this perfect storm, aren't we, of horrible possibilities. The virus is this invisible enemy, and it leads to so many other threats. And the people making the decisions, well, we don't know if they've really got our best interests at heart, do we? Or if their accounting of our best interests might be skewed by other interests, or by others' interests. And so we feel like little pawns being moved around on a global chessboard. And of course, on top of all that, we feel powerless to help other people. Some of the most affecting things I've seen through this whole time have been videos of doctors and nurses describing their feelings of impotency in the face of a great sea of coronavirus victims. We just couldn't do anything, they say. Who would want to be in that position? And of course, it's not just the doctors, is it? All the rest of us can do is stay at home, or be alert, whatever that means. And it's not really helping, is it? It's just not making things any worse. And we'd love to do more, but we daren't make it worse. And so in so many ways, we are actually powerless. Powerless before the virus, powerless before the global economy, powerless before the political powers that be that direct the government one way or another, powerless to help our families, powerless even to see them. And all this hurts all the more because we thought we were in control. We thought we could save for a rainy day, invest now and secure a better future for our kids, work hard and get the results. But we're finding that we can't control the future. The future is always uncertain. Now I'm painting a bleak picture, aren't I? But perhaps no worse than the situation requires. So what do we do with such powerlessness? When we can't do anything for ourselves, where do we turn? What hope is there for us? Well, we're not the first to feel powerless, and we won't be the last. In Jesus' day, the nation was under foreign rule and had been for hundreds of years. They were taxed mercilessly. Rulers were corrupt and selfish. Systems were rotten to the core. God's people were helpless. And of course, there was social hierarchy. Some did better than others. But at the very bottom of the pile, there was one group so low they were beyond pitiful. If you had leprosy in first century Israel, that was you, lowest of the low. And this morning, we're going to watch how Jesus loved and cared for the most powerless of the powerless in Mark chapter 1, verses 40 to 45. Let's just pause and pray before we get into it. Lord Jesus, we thank you that you notice the little people and that you care for us in our need. Today, as we feel just how powerless we are, might we also see just how powerful you are. and may we come to delight in your care for us. Amen. So we're really early in the story of Jesus, aren't we? Still chapter 1 in Mark's Gospel. Jesus has done a few miracles. Notably, he healed all those who came to him who were sick or demon-possessed in Capernaum. But he's not yet the sensation that he would go on to become. Still, in verse 45, this leper comes to him looking for cleansing. Verse 40, sorry. Now, Mark doesn't say much about him. He's a man with leprosy. That's all we need to know. But Luke, who's a doctor, gives us one more key detail. He says this man is covered in leprosy. That is, he's a long way gone. His body is ravaged by the disease. Now, leprosy was the first century's coronavirus. It was so frightening and so apparently contagious that those who had leprosy, they were total pariahs. They were forced into extreme social distancing. Right back in Leviticus chapter 13, it mandates that people with leprosy need to live outside the camp. That is, they're excluded from the normal life of the nation, forced to live out of town in lonely places. Worse than that, they're ceremonially unclean, and anyone who touches them becomes unclean themselves. And so that people don't accidentally touch them, they are forced to tear their clothes, and as they go about, they're to call out, "Unclean, unclean." Now, this man probably doesn't need to do that anymore. His leprosy is obvious to everyone. And then, of course, the Pharisees love to heap heavy loads on the people, as Jesus put it. So it's no surprise they added extra indignities for the lepers. It was illegal, for example, to allow a leper into your house. But all of this wasn't the worst for the man. No, having leprosy was the worst of it. Leprosy is insidious. It deadens the body's sense of pain. So the leper literally kills themselves little by little, even without even noticing it. Luke says the man is covered in leprosy, covered in sores. Not because leprosy produces sores itself, but because the leper would scratch off his own skin without even feeling it, would cut himself without pulling back, would burn himself and just keep on burning himself, not even realizing. So little by little, bit by bit, his body was turned into a mass of sores. Talk about powerless. The man couldn't even tell he was doing it to himself. He couldn't stop it. There was no cure. There was no treatment. No hope of recovery. All he had to look forward to was a long, slow deterioration, far from friends and family, his body progressively ruined. So the man comes to Jesus and he throws himself onto his knees before him. Luke says he had his face to the ground. He's literally throwing himself on the mercy of Jesus. I mean, his desperation is obvious, isn't it? And he literally begs Jesus on his knees. Isn't that a picture of helplessness right there? He has nothing to offer. He's pitiful, hopeless, helpless, friendless. All he can do is beg. And beg he does, on his knees. This is powerlessness personified. But he recognises something that others have missed. He looks at Jesus and he sees someone who can heal him. Look what he says to Jesus in Luke 40. He doesn't say, "Please try and do something for me." No, he's much more confident in Jesus' power than that. He says, "If you are willing, you can make me clean. You can make me clean. You can." He's right, of course. I wonder how he had such confidence. To his mind, Jesus' power is not in doubt, but maybe his compassion might be. Jesus might be willing, but he might not. Maybe that's how we feel this morning too. Jesus might be this great king, but he doesn't see me. And if he does, well, he mustn't care. I mean, he's left us all here to suffer without him. Well, let me tell you, in the New Testament, if one thing that is never in doubt, it's Jesus' compassion. Time and again, he is moved by compassion to help. And so it is here, verse 41, filled with compassion, Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. Stop there a moment. Just pause, stop the tape. We understand this better right now than we could have just 2 months ago. The man was unclean. To touch him made everyone else unclean. He was diseased and terrible to look at. To touch him was to risk catching his contagion. Now, if you're cut off from loved ones right now, you'll be feeling this too, especially if you're on your own. You just want to touch someone, to hug them, to give and to receive physical affection. Well, put yourself in the shoes of this man. When was the last time he was touched? And being a leper, when was the last time he felt it? It could have been years and years. Now, Jesus, of course, could heal with just a word, but he doesn't. You see what he does? He reaches out his hand and he touches the man. Do you see? Jesus gets it. He feels our pain. He sees this man. He really sees him. He knows the particular, precise nature of this man's struggle. And he gives him the very thing that's been denied him so long. He reaches out and he touches him in love. Now press play. Back to verse 41. I am willing, Jesus said. Immediately the leprosy left him and he was cured. It's not just a ceremonial touch, it was an effective touch. The man is healed immediately. Jesus' power is so great, his word is immediately fulfilled. No sooner are the words out of Jesus' lips than the effect is obvious. His skin is pure and clean again. His sores are gone, his leprosy is cured. Now we can imagine how this might look in the Hollywood version. The layers of special effects removed, the broken, scarred, damaged man straightens up. His stiffened fingers stretch out. His disgusting sores close up. The blackened skin goes back to skin colour. His face is transformed. His features restored. And most of all, joy replaces misery. He leaps up from the ground to celebrate. But this is no Hollywood production. This actually happened. Right there, no special effects required. The leprosy just left him. He was cured. Praise God. Cue the celebrations. Jesus saw his desperation. Jesus saw the man under the sores, and Jesus cared for him. And Jesus gave him his life back. He could go to the priest now and get his immunity passport, and he could go right on back to his family, his friends, his job, his home, his church, his life. And evidently, the man did dive right back into social interactions, judging by the way he spread the news of his healing to everyone. Pardon the pun, but now his story goes viral. Everybody hears what Jesus has done. And did you notice that at the end of the story, Jesus takes his place? At first, he was isolating out in lonely places. But where is Jesus by the end of the story? Verse 45, as a result, Jesus could no longer enter a town openly, but stayed outside in lonely places. There's another beautiful little picture of the gospel exchange, isn't it? Jesus doesn't just rescue the man, he takes his place. And I don't know if this resonates with you, but it really should. I mean, zoom out of first century Israel for a moment and consider how your situation isn't so different than the unnamed leper in our passage. Not so different, but better by almost every measure. I mean, not many of us listening to this are in the advanced stages of a terminal illness. Not many of us are cut off completely from all human contact. Not many of us have so little to look forward to. But all of us can speak to Jesus with a word, just as that man did, because Jesus has already taken our place too. And Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He hasn't forgotten to have compassion. He hasn't stopped seeing the little people. He's not feeling the pressure from the lobby groups or had his head turned by big business or international affairs. He sees us wherever we are. He gets us. And he has compassion. Remember Hebrews 4, 15 and 16? It says we do not have a high priest who's unable to sympathise with our weaknesses, but we have one who's been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet was without sin. Let us therefore approach the throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and grace to help in our time of need. See, Jesus is ever ready to help us. So call out to him and he will supply the mercy and the grace we need to survive. And switch to another camera angle. Leprosy is often used as an illustration of sin in the Bible because its operation is so similar. You can't see the disease, but you can see its effects. And its effects reach into every area of your life, every part of your body. Once infected with leprosy, there's no escape. Little by little, it's killing you. You're powerless. There's nothing you can do to get free. All you can do is to cry out to God for rescue. But when you cry out to God, God will rescue. What looks like a pathetic gesture turns out to be exactly what's needed. And all of it turns on this. The leper has to recognise their own helplessness, their own powerlessness before God, their need. You can't heal yourself. There's no one else who can heal you either. Jesus isn't just your last resort, he is your only hope. So think about this. If you're actually powerless, the first thing you need is to recognise your powerlessness. There's no one more helpless than the man who refuses to admit the danger they're in. And look at Brazil right now. The president is strutting around telling everyone there's nothing to worry about. He's still shaking hands. He's still going to barbecues. Everyone else should get out to the gym and just keep going about their business. There's nothing to worry about. And so he puts everyone at risk. And the infection rate is accelerating and people are dying. Brazil has nightly pot banging, not to celebrate their brave NHS workers, but to protest against their blasé president putting all their lives at risk. But that's a picture of our entire lives, isn't it? Strutting around thinking we're in control when we're anything but. Making our plans, beating our chest, asserting our independence, our power. But we're not in power. All of our wealth, all of our knowledge, all of our advancements, they blind us to the realities of our great need before God. We're simply lepers. We're in the grip of a deadly infection and it's going to kill us if we don't cry out to God. Sin is alive and at work in us, in our members. It has its effect. And it hurts to feel powerless, doesn't it? But it's the reality we need to face. And powerlessness would be terrible if coronavirus was ultimately in control, or governments or lobby groups or armies or corporations, even gods or demons. But it's Jesus who's in control. And he's good, and he's gracious, and he stands ever ready to rescue us. So then, perhaps the question isn't, how can we get our power back? How can we get rid of this horrible feeling of weakness? But perhaps the question is, how can we come to realize just how powerless we are? How can we be freed from this false sense that we're in control? How can we learn to see just how small we are and how great and how wonderful he is? I wasn't going to do this week. Don't want to overdo it. But there's a great City Light song that captures this so simply. I can't help but think I should give the last word to it this morning. So what I want you to do is just to sit and listen to this. Sing along if you want to. The words are on the screen. But I want you to take time to reflect on Jesus' awesome power and your absolute need, and to give him the glory he deserves. So use this as a time of reflection. Let's look at the song now.